Amidst our people, here is come the madness of the dance. In every town there are now some who fall upon a trance. It drives them ever night and day, they scarcely stop for breath, till some have dropped along the way, and some are met by death. On June the 24th, 1374, people on the streets of Aachen, Germany, inexplicably began dancing around and reportedly experiencing hallucinations with an apparent case of the St. John's dance, or the dance plague. Their numbers, they swelled into the thousands before the event ceased. This was the first of the two best documented cases of this phenomenon, though this sort of thing, it wasn't unheard of, with instances as far back as the 7th century. It also periodically popped up all the way to the 17th century. For example, another extreme dance mania event that was well documented happens in July of 1518, starting with just one woman, Frau Trofea, who began to dance about in the streets of Strasbourg, Alsace. Soon, others joined her for a near month-long dance orgy, with the numbers swelling throughout the event and a few hundred participants dying from cardiac arrest, physical injuries, and just extreme exhaustion. In another early incident of dance mania, this time in Erfurt, Germany, people began dancing maniacally on a bridge over the Moselle River, which then collapsed, killing many of the 200 participants. Those who survived were taken to a chapel that was dedicated to St. Vitus, hence why dance mania is also sometimes referred to as St. Vitus's mania. Depending on where dance mania occurred, the reaction from the general populace varied greatly. For instance, in Italy, dance mania was thought of as a good thing, with it being used as a cure for people who were bitten by something poisonous, or if they thought they were bitten or came into contact with someone who was bitten. However, in other places, you were liable to be killed if you took part in it, such as in 1507 in Spain, when 30 women were burned alive after being seen dancing hysterically. On that note, while a mass number of people suddenly breaking out in hysteric dance and sometimes song may sound funny, and today, well, YouTube gold, in fact, it was anything but at the time. The people would continue vigorously jumping and dancing about, sometimes also screaming out or chanting, until completely exhausted, at which point they would collapse, and some of them would die from cardiac arrest or injuries suffered from their violent dance. Those who didn't die, once exhausted, would reportedly sometimes twitch around on the ground, foaming at the mouth and gasping until they were once again able to get up and continue their dance. This dance mania, in some cases, it would last for weeks or even months. Besides dancing, participants would also sometimes roll around in the dirt, squealing and acting like animals. Others would rip off their clothing and sometimes would begin having sex with other dance mania participants. Some would also scream for people to beat the bottoms of their feet while they writhed on the ground, or would other times try to get people to throw them high into the air. Others would make crude or sexual gestures at those around them, or threaten to attack spectators who refused to join in their hysteric dance. At the time, it was thought that this hysteric dancing was possibly caused by demons possessing people, a curse, hot blood, and a number of other wild guesses. Today, most take a more pragmatic view of things. One hypothesis is that these dance mania events were carefully organized, possibly by a religious cult or cults who were performing some ritual or another, not unlike certain rituals the ancient Romans and ancient Greeks used to perform. This is somewhat supported by the fact that many of the instigators of dance mania events were often people on pilgrimages. Normally, this sort of behavior would have gotten them in a lot of trouble, but masking it as a mass outbreak would sometimes allow them to perform their ritual publicly without any retribution, though not always, as previously mentioned, the whole execution thing. Another popular hypothesis is that it was caused by ergotism, also called St. Anthony's fire. Specifically, the rye and other foodstuffs eaten by people may have been infected with a fungus called Claviceps purpurea, which in turn contains alkaloids that cause hallucinations, seizures, mania, convulsions, irrational behavior, and unconsciousness. However, it is also associated with loss of limbs due to restricted blood circulation, and these incidents of dance mania don't seem to be connected with many of the people having their limbs become gangrenous. Yet another popular hypothesis, which seems the most reasonable, is that due to the extreme stress people were often under during times when dance mania popped up, such as rampant plagues, floods, poverty, etc., it simply started with a few people snapping and others joining in, not unlike the just as bizarre phenomenon of running amok, where people in the Malay culture would occasionally randomly run amok, killing or trying to kill anyone they came across, only to later recover their senses and return to normal if they weren't killed first. Because it was thought that an evil spirit caused this, rather than the person doing it of their own free will, punishments for someone who ran amok and survived were typically light or even non-existent, with the person sometimes getting off scot-free. However, usually the person would be killed while running amok, and some speculate this was generally the point of doing this, as people who ran amok were and are often those who suddenly experienced great trauma in their life, like the death of several loved ones or the loss of the ability to provide for themselves or to their family. So basically, the person wants to die but doesn't want to commit suicide directly, so goes on a murderous rampage until someone kills them. Even today, this sort of thing can be seen in the news practically every day, where someone is really just attempting death by cop, going on a rampage until the police manage to kill them. Alright, so let's get back to dance mania. As the number of frantic dancers swelled, herd behavior seems to have taken over and a form of mass hysteria resulted. As the hysteria reached a fever pitch, people were even willing to inflict serious physical injury upon themselves, even to the point of death from injury or exhaustion, seemingly unable to stop. In the extreme, this could potentially cause hallucinations and the like, as the people became sleep-deprived, dehydrated, malnourished, and physically exhausted. Popular cures for dance mania at the time included praying to St. John the Baptist. Some even thought that he was causing the dancing, hence the name St. John's Dance. There was also performing mass exorcisms on people affected by the dance, getting musicians to play. The musicians would attempt to try and match their music with the general pace of the dance. Then, once they did so, they would gradually slow down the pace of the music in an attempt to get people to stop. Even though this was considered a common cure, it more often than not appears to have caused the number of participants to swell. Along the same line of reasoning as adding music to the dance to stop it, one wonders why they just didn't go all out and distribute free alcohol. That would have certainly cured it for sure. On that note, another popular cure was to use musicians in another way. In this case, they'd actually try to encourage dancing with musicians, and they'd even build dance stages where people could dance it out. Some believe the dance was caused by that hot blood we mentioned, and the only way to cure it was for people to dance continuously day and night until the affliction passed. Thus, they provided the facilities and musicians who were instructed to try to keep people dancing as long as possible. And now for a bonus fact. Another case of inexplicable mass hysteria, this time unrelated to dancing and much more recent, occurred on January 30th, 1962, and it was known as the Tanganyika laughter epidemic. This occurred in Kashasha in Tanzania. In the beginning, 3 girls began giggling and laughing apparently uncontrollably, as young girls often seem to do. What made this incident notable was that this laughter spread throughout the school. After about 4 months of this occurring, off and on, with as many as 60% of the students affected, the school was forced to close down. It didn't stop there though, spreading to villages such as Nshamba and Bukoba. In the end, 14 schools had to be shut down, and an estimated 1,000 people, mostly school-aged children, were affected. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do give us a thumbs up below. Don't forget to subscribe. Also, I've got another channel you should definitely check out. It's called Top 10s. It's top 10 lists. If you didn't get that from the title of the channel, please find that linked to below. And as always, thank you for watching.